Theodore Miles had been Harvard's janitor for 12 years, unseen, unheard, unseen, until one morning, he whispered a flawless correction in Mandarin during a diplomat's visit. The professor froze. The room fell silent. "Where did you learn that?" "While cleaning your floors," Theo replied. But instead of praise, they launched an investigation. His crime, knowing too much in a uniform they didn't respect. And what they did next would change everything. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Harvard University in fall was a postcard of privilege. Brick buildings blushed red beneath golden leaves, and a soft hush of prestige hung in the air like incense. Students hurried between classes, headphones in, books clutched tight, minds trained on success. Beneath their hurried steps, Theodore Miles mopped the halls of Emerson Hall. Theo, as he was called by the other custodians, had worked at Harvard for 12 quiet years. Every morning he clocked in before sunrise. By the time the students swarmed through the grand oak doors, the floors gleamed, the windows sparkled, and the trash bins stood empty like sentinels awaiting orders. No one ever asked how long he'd been there. Most didn't know his name. Some, faculty included, referred to him as the black janitor with the gloves. Theo never corrected them. He moved with a deliberate grace, pushing his cart from room to room, sweeping behind rows of empty chairs where future lawmakers and Nobel laureates would sit. The school called itself a beacon of progress, of intellect, of inclusion. But every day Theo saw how power dressed in manners but lived in silence. He could clean a floor so clean you could eat from it, and still be mistaken for a delivery man. Theo kept his secrets folded tight, like the handkerchief he wore in his back pocket. He wasn't bitter. He was beyond that. He was simply invisible. And in places like Harvard, invisibility was armor. Until the morning of October 9th. The Language and Global Policy Department was hosting a closed-door seminar with a visiting Chinese diplomat. Theo had been assigned to clean the room beforehand, which was nothing new. What was new was that the room wasn't empty when he entered. 3 department chairs and the diplomat were in mid-conversation, reviewing presentation slides in Mandarin. Theo froze in the doorway, mop in hand. He turned to leave silently, but a phrase caught his ear, something about Western misconceptions of tonal dialects. Without thinking, he muttered under his breath in perfect Mandarin. "Actually, that assumption lacks linguistic nuance. The dialects aren't hierarchical." The words had barely left his mouth when he realized what he'd done. The room went silent. The diplomat turned. So did Dr. Warren Caldwell, head of the linguistics department. Theo stood frozen, mop in hand, mouth slightly open. Dr. Caldwell squinted, confused. "Excuse me?" Theo blinked. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt." The diplomat raised an eyebrow. "Your pronunciation is native level. Where did you learn Mandarin?" Theo hesitated. "Here, there, books, audio recordings. I pick things up." The silence in the room thickened. Caldwell stared at him like a museum exhibit that had suddenly spoken. "You're the janitor, correct?" "Yes, sir. Theodore Miles." The diplomat smiled faintly, impressed. Caldwell, however, offered no such reaction. Instead, he simply nodded once. "Thank you, Mr. Miles. You may continue your work." Theo bowed his head and slipped back into motion, mop gliding across the polished floor, heart hammering in his chest. But he felt it. The shift. The way Caldwell watched him now wasn't the way one watched a janitor. It was the way one watched a puzzle they suddenly realized they couldn't solve. Later that afternoon, Theo was back in the supply closet, refilling cleaning solution. His hands moved by memory, but his mind raced. Had he ruined everything? Would they think he was mocking them? Would there be a complaint? A report? The Harvard hierarchy was fragile. It didn't tolerate surprises from people like him. He was still reeling from it when he stepped out into the hallway and found Dr. Caldwell standing by his cart. "Mr. Miles," Caldwell said, as if testing the name. Theo straightened. "Yes, sir. How many languages do you speak?" The question hit like a slap. Theo paused. 9. Fluently. A few others conversationally. Caldwell's brow lifted. 9. Yes, sir. Mandarin, Korean, Arabic, Russian, French, Spanish, Swahili, Latin, and Sanskrit. And you learned all of these? How? Listening, reading, repetition. I have audiobooks. I watch lectures online. I memorize them while I clean. Caldwell studied him. Why? Theo exhaled slowly. Because I love the way language breaks and builds barriers, and because no one expects a janitor to speak Sanskrit. Caldwell said nothing for a long moment. Then he nodded. Come by my office after your shift. I'd like to run a few phonetic drills with you. Theo hesitated. Sir? Consider it a curiosity. Theo didn't reply. He nodded, tucked the mop back into its slot, and wheeled his cart away. He didn't see the look on Caldwell's face as he walked off. Part awe, part something else. Something calculating. That evening, Theo stood outside Caldwell's office, palms sweating. The campus was quiet now. Students off to their dorms or coffee shops. Theo was still in uniform, unsure if he should have changed. Inside, Caldwell had prepared a laptop, headphones, and several short linguistic assessments, phonetic repetitions, cultural comprehension tests, even an obscure tonal shift quiz in Xhosa. Theo passed them all. Caldwell sat back in his chair, visibly stunned. You're either a savant or a con artist. I'm neither, Theo replied. I'm someone who was never given a desk, so I made my education mobile. For the first time, Caldwell smiled. It wasn't warm. Ever thought about academia? Theo stiffened. I applied to Harvard twice. Back in 2009, I was rejected both times. And since then, no one asks janitors for recommendations. Caldwell leaned forward. That might be a mistake worth correcting. But Theo saw it now. The glint in the professor's eyes wasn't kindness. It was possession, like he had just discovered an ancient artifact buried under dust. The next morning, Theo went about his routine. But something was different. Whispers followed him in the halls. A few students stared longer. A professor nodded at him. By noon, he realized what had happened. Someone had leaked footage from Caldwell's office. In the grainy video, Theo could be seen decoding ancient script from memory, answering Caldwell's questions without missing a beat. The caption read, Harvard janitor outsmarts linguistics chair. It had been uploaded to the student server. Then Reddit, then Twitter. And the views were climbing fast. By 3 p.m., faculty inboxes were flooding with it. By 6 p.m., Theo received an official summons from Human Resources. They wanted to talk about his unauthorized access to faculty spaces. But Theo knew the truth. They weren't investigating what he did. They were trying to figure out how he had done it without their permission. And Dr. Caldwell? He hadn't reported him. He had followed him. Theo didn't sleep that night. After the Human Resources meeting, he walked the perimeter of the campus twice, then returned to his one-bedroom apartment in Roxbury. It was modest, bare walls, a second-hand couch, and a single bookshelf stacked high with dog-eared dictionaries, grammar guides, and notebooks filled with his looping, disciplined handwriting. He stared at the blinking cursor on his old laptop. The campus Wi-Fi barely reaching through the apartment walls. The footage of him in Caldwell's office had now surpassed 200,000 views. Some comments called him a genius. Others called him a fraud. One anonymous thread on a campus forum questioned whether the video had been staged. No janitor is that articulate. Theo had read that comment 3 times. It wasn't the disbelief that stung. It was the word janitor, spat out like a limitation, not a job, like a ceiling he dared to punch through. He remembered applying to Harvard's graduate program in linguistics back in 2009. He'd prepared for months, scored in the 99th percentile on his GRE. His writing samples were so dense with layered etymological theory, he had to create his own footnote legend. But when the rejection letter came, it didn't mention qualifications. It mentioned pedigree. It spoke of He didn't bother applying again for 3 more years. The second rejection letter was shorter, colder. We regret to inform you. After that, he'd stopped trying. Harvard would never see him as anything more than a uniform and a broom. So he stayed, took the janitor job, used it as a disguise. While others threw away knowledge, he picked it up, literally. Academic journals tossed in recycling bins, notebooks abandoned during finals week, flash drives left in libraries. He treated each one like treasure. Every language he learned came with a ritual. He'd choose a bench by the Charles River and memorize 20 new words before sunrise. At lunch, he'd read aloud into a recorder. At night, he'd transcribe phrases until his hands cramped. Swahili became his morning language. Latin belonged to late nights. Arabic flowed with his deepest thoughts. He learned the heartbeat of each language, the syllables, the silences, the secrets. And yet no one ever asked him why. They asked where the bathroom keys were. They asked him to refill the paper towels. They asked him to be quiet when he hummed under his breath, in Korean. But not once did anyone ask, "What do you know, Theo?" Until now. The next morning, Theo arrived at campus, before dawn, hoping the situation would cool off. But the moment he stepped inside, he knew everything had changed. His supervisor, Marla Jenkins, met him by the loading dock. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes were tired. "You're being reassigned," she said flatly. "Effective immediately. Basement levels only. Storage and archives." Theo blinked. "Why?" She sighed. "HR says it's for your safety. But between you and me, they're trying to put the fire out. Too much heat on Caldwell. And the department doesn't like disruption." "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know. Doesn't matter." Theo nodded slowly. He understood. In a system built on silence, the moment you're heard, you become a problem. By noon, he was underground. The storage rooms were musty and dimly lit. Rows of untouched documents, expired syllabi, and rusted filing cabinets lined the walls. But in one dusty corner, Theo found something unexpected: an abandoned language lab from the early 90s. Cassettes labeled in Yoruba, Hindi, Tagalog, shelves of audio textbooks. Forgotten, obsolete. To anyone else, it would look like trash. To Theo, it was a sanctuary. He began spending his breaks there, headphones over his ears, lips murmuring forgotten dialects. In that stale, dusty silence, he built a new classroom of one. No applause, no judgment, just fluency. But outside those walls, the narrative about him was shifting. Students had started a petition, recognized Theo Miles' contributions to linguistics. Faculty emails leaked, showing debates over whether Theo had violated privacy protocols. Caldwell was notably silent. Not once did he step forward to defend Theo's intellect. Instead, he released a vague statement about the importance of academic gatekeeping. That word again, gatekeeping. It wasn't about knowledge. It was about access. One afternoon, while cataloging outdated teaching materials, Theo found a worn binder with the name Dr. R. Whitmore on the spine. Inside were handwritten lecture notes and a reference letter, yellowed with time. It was addressed to Harvard admissions, and it was about him. "Theodore Miles is one of the most disciplined and naturally gifted linguistic minds I've encountered in 3 decades, it read. His rejection would be a disservice to academia. Dated to. Theo sat down slowly, hands trembling. He had never seen this letter. It was never mentioned in his application status. He had assumed, all these years, that no one had advocated for him. But someone had. And someone had buried it. He photocopied the letter and tucked it into his backpack, unsure what to feel. Vindicated, angry, both? That evening, as he exited the archives building, a student waited by the gate. She was young, nervous, with a determined posture. "You're Theo Miles?" she asked. He nodded. "My name's Lena. I'm a freshman in international relations. I saw your video. I think what they're doing to you is disgusting." Theo didn't know how to respond. She continued. "I wanted to ask you something. Not as a protester. As a student." He nodded again, wary. "Why did you keep learning? Even when no one cared?" Theo looked at her for a long time. "Because the world tries to shrink people like me. Language gave me places to expand." She smiled softly, eyes bright. "That's the most human answer I've ever heard." Before he could reply, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. Caldwell just posted something. She handed him the phone. On the screen was a tweet from Dr. Caldwell. "In recent days, there's been public confusion about a non-academic employee's role in a private research setting. Let's be clear. Fluency does not equal scholarship. Standards matter." Theo felt the words hit, like a gut punch. He didn't name Theo. But he didn't have to. He reduced him to a non-academic. A man who spoke 9 languages, but still wasn't worth listening to. Lena whispered, "They're scared of you." Theo shook his head. "No. They're scared of what it means if someone like me belongs here." She asked, "So what are you going to do?" Theo didn't answer. Not yet. Because as he turned the corner heading home, a voice called out from behind him. An older woman, breathless, caught up to him. She wore a faculty badge, Dr. Marin Holt, Anthropology Department. "I need to speak with you," she said urgently. He paused. She leaned in, lowered her voice. "Did you know your second rejection in 2012 was blocked by a private donor? I have proof. And it's worse than you think." Dr. Warren Caldwell stood at the edge of the quad, coffee in hand, as the wind tugged gently at his coat. His eyes were fixed on Theo, who was now shuffling across the lawn with a dustpan, having been reassigned yet again, this time to discreet public spaces. Caldwell wasn't a man known for humility. He was Harvard royalty, tenured at 37, the author of 4 textbooks, and keynote speaker at global linguistic summits. His face had once graced the cover of The Atlantic, beside the headline, "The New Voice of American Language Policy." And yet all his accolades, all his lectures, had never stopped what he now felt gnawing in the pit of his stomach: insecurity. He had spent a career studying multilingualism, had built an entire department around phonetic anthropology, and in the span of 2 hours, a janitor had rattled his intellectual scaffolding, without even trying. But admiration was not what guided Caldwell's next move. It was possession. He approached Theo again that Friday afternoon, this time with a thin smile and a tone dipped in casual flattery. "Mr. Miles," he began, "I've been reviewing our conversation from earlier. I was hoping you might assist me in a linguistic calibration exercise." Theo didn't move. He stared at Caldwell's shoes first, then met his gaze slowly. "Calibration? Yes. I've got a doctoral candidate defending next week. Her thesis explores sociolinguistic variance in Seoul, very specific dialects. Your pronunciation of Korean struck me as unusually accurate." Theo gave a polite, non-committal nod. "I'd like to invite you to my private lab. Just the 2 of us. Informal, of course." Theo hesitated. "I'd need to clear that with HR. My reassignment limits where No need," Caldwell interrupted. "I've cleared it. Special exception." That word again. Exception. Theo agreed. That evening, he walked into Caldwell's lab, through the back corridor, an unmarked room in the linguistics wing, soundproofed and unmonitored. There was something unsettling about the secrecy, but Theo told himself it was opportunity. Maybe finally, someone was listening. Inside, Caldwell had already prepared the setup: a high-end mic, recording software, and a whiteboard filled with dialect transcriptions. "Let's begin," he said, handing Theo a printout of a thesis chapter. "Take your time." Theo read silently. Then, without prompting, began correcting syntactical assumptions, reinterpreting tone contexts, and highlighting culturally embedded idioms most native speakers barely noticed. Caldwell scribbled furiously. Not once did he interrupt. After 20 minutes, Caldwell brought in the student herself, Mina Choi, a doctoral fellow with wire-rimmed glasses and trembling hands. She looked confused when Theo entered the room. "This is Mr. Miles," Caldwell said smoothly. "He's assisting us with field accuracy." Mina blinked. "The janitor." Theo didn't flinch. "Correct." They sat. Mina read a passage. Theo paused her halfway through. "That's not Busan dialect. That's Gyeongsang. You're merging them." She frowned. "But the fieldwork—" "I don't need fieldwork," Theo said calmly. "I hear it in your vowels." Caldwell watched the exchange like a hawk circling prey. Mina adjusted her glasses, flushed with embarrassment. When she left, Caldwell turned to Theo. "You dismantled her argument in 15 minutes. I clarified it," Theo replied. "There's a difference." Caldwell chuckled. "Do you have any idea what that's worth on the academic circuit?" Theo narrowed his eyes. "I think I do, but I'm not looking for applause. I'm looking for access." That night, Theo returned home, feeling both energized and uneasy. Something about Caldwell's praise rang hollow. It wasn't gratitude. It was hunger. The next 3 nights followed the same pattern. Theo would show up after hours, and Caldwell would present a new linguistic challenge. Urdu morphology, Berber consonantal roots, a Yiddish-German code-switching puzzle. Theo solved them all. By the 4th session, Theo asked bluntly, "Why are you recording me?" Caldwell didn't flinch. Documentation. For peer review." "Don't worry, you're not on camera. Just voice." Theo nodded, but the answer didn't sit right. Then came the incident with the locked drawer. On the 5th night, while Caldwell stepped out to take a call, Theo noticed the drawer of the main desk ajar. Inside was a folder marked M. Shoei Dissertation Draft, with TM annotations. TM, Theo Miles. He opened it. Every single correction he'd made, line edits, notations, phonetic clarifications, had been typed and footnoted, but nowhere did his name appear in the contributor credits. Caldwell had taken Theo's voice and turned it into invisible labor. The folder's final page was a submission form for a regional linguistics award. Primary author Dr. Warren Caldwell. Secondary author Mina Choi. Theo closed the drawer and walked out of the lab that night, without saying a word. The next morning, he skipped his assignment and returned to the archives. He sat in silence, replaying every moment, every quote, every flattery Caldwell had dangled like bait. He saw it all now, not as collaboration, but as consumption. And he was the meal. That afternoon, an anonymous message landed in Theo's inbox. Just 2 lines. You need to see this. Check the internal server. Folder. Lab recordings. Restricted. No signature. No clue who sent it. He logged in using an old admin code he'd memorized years ago while fixing a Janitor terminal. It still worked. He clicked through the directory and found the folder. There were 6 video files. They weren't just audio, as Caldwell claimed. They were full video recordings from multiple angles. Hidden cameras embedded in the lab's corner ceiling tiles. He clicked the first. It was him. Sitting, speaking, correcting. Caldwell nodding. He clicked the second. Same. Third. Same. But the 4th video stopped him cold. It was from the session with Mina Choi. Halfway through her reading, she glanced nervously at the camera and asked, "Will he know this is being submitted under your name?" Caldwell replied off camera. "He doesn't need to. He gets the thrill of being heard. That's enough." Theo sat back, breath caught in his throat. This wasn't curiosity. This was theft. And now he had proof. He downloaded all 6 videos and emailed them to himself. He didn't know what he'd do with them yet, but he knew this much. The rules had changed. The next morning, every member of the linguistics department received an automatic sync alert. New files had been uploaded to the shared internal drive. Theo hadn't posted them, which meant someone else had. Every video, every conversation, every lie. Within hours, phones rang. Meetings were canceled. Caldwell went radio silent. In Theo, he stood outside the department entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, watching as chaos unfolded behind the glass doors. Students peered at him through the window, not with pity, not even with awe, with clarity. Theo was no longer invisible. He was undeniable. And somewhere inside the building, Caldwell was realizing something terrifying. He hadn't just underestimated Theo. He had documented his own downfall. The footage from the lab mysteriously leaked onto the department's internal server. The video had only been live on the department's internal server for 6 hours before it found its way to Reddit. From there it exploded. Clips were trimmed, recaptioned, remixed with music, and uploaded to TikTok. The most viral snippet was the moment Theo gently corrected the phonetic structure of an ancient Sanskrit sentence, reciting a revised version so fluidly, even native speakers were stunned. A trending tweet read, "This Harvard janitor just dismantled a dissertation in 5 minutes flat. Let him teach." By the next morning, Theo's name was on everyone's lips. From undergrads in dining halls to guest lecturers on sabbatical, students whispered about the genius in the shadows, while faculty exchanged clipped, tense conversations behind office doors. Harvard was buzzing, but not with pride, with discomfort. And nowhere was that discomfort more concentrated than in the office of Dr. Bradley Northam, chair of the linguistics department. Dr. Northam, a man known for his pressed suits and gritted teeth, stared at the department server on his screen. 6 video files. Multiple sessions. Footage showing a janitor intellectually overpowering his prized doctoral student. It wasn't just embarrassing. It was mutiny. The footage didn't just threaten Caldwell. It threatened the department's entire hierarchy. Theo wasn't just brilliant. He was undeniable. And Harvard had denied him twice. That couldn't be allowed to stand. By noon, Northam convened a closed-door emergency meeting with senior faculty. He entered restricted academic spaces without clearance, one professor offered. "He's not licensed to evaluate academic work," added another. "We don't even know the full extent of what Caldwell gave him access to," a third chimed in. What if FERPA violations occurred? They didn't discuss Theo's mind, or the accuracy of his analysis, or what it meant that a janitor could outthink half the department. Because to them, this wasn't about brilliance. It was about boundaries. Northam cleared his throat. "We'll launch a formal inquiry. Quietly. Grounds: unauthorized presence, disruption of academic operations, breach of confidentiality." "And Caldwell?" someone asked. Northam hesitated. "We protect the institution. That means controlling the narrative." The next day, Theo was summoned again, this time not to HR. to a committee hearing. The room was sterile, lined with books and judgment. A panel of 6 faculty members sat behind a long table. Dr. Northam led. Theo, in his usual uniform navy work shirt, faded khakis and his name stitched over the chest, stood alone. "We're here," Northam began, "to address concerns raised over your conduct within restricted departmental facilities." Theo's jaw tightened. "Is this about the recordings?" Northam didn't blink. "It's about procedural integrity." Theo folded his hands. "Was Dr. Caldwell summoned as well?" "He has provided his statement. You, however, entered his lab without proper documentation." "I was invited." "Without institutional approval," Northam said firmly. "Mr. Miles, while your linguistic abilities are notable, we must adhere to standards of academic engagement." There it was again. Standards. A word they used to sanitize racism. Theo stood still. "If I wore a blazer and not a name tag, would we be having this conversation?" Silence. Someone on the panel adjusted their glasses. "Uncomfortable." Theo continued, voice steady. "I've cleaned your offices. I've translated text you don't read. I've never asked for credit. But now that the world is watching, now that your system's cracks are exposed, suddenly I'm a threat." Northam's nostrils flared. "This is not about appearances." "No," Theo said quietly. "It's about control." The hearing ended with vague reassurances of follow-up decisions and protocol evaluations. But Theo knew this wasn't a hearing. It was a warning. That afternoon, an email hit his inbox. "Effective immediately, Mr. Miles is placed on temporary administrative leave, pending outcome of departmental review. No end date. No appeals process. Just exile." By nightfall, the story had flipped. Reddit threads speculated that Theo had stolen research. An anonymous user claimed he'd hacked the department server. A faculty-aligned account stated, "He was never enrolled at Harvard. Why was he near sensitive documents in the first place?" And Caldwell? Silent. Not one word of defense. The man who called Theo a linguistic marvel, in private, now ghosted him publicly. Even Mina Choi, whose thesis Theo had saved from collapse, released a statement. "My work reflects years of study. Any collaboration was informal and did not constitute authorship." Theo read the statement 3 times. His hands trembled. He'd been erased again, this time more publicly. The whispers turned to headlines. "Custodian or conman? Harvard janitor's role sparks security concerns." Theo stayed home the next day watching it unfold. Lena texted constantly, angry, mobilizing. A student sit-in began to form. But the administration moved faster. By Thursday, they issued a new memo campus-wide. All non-academic staff are required to remain within their assigned facilities. Loitering in research or instructional spaces will result in disciplinary action. The walls were closing in. Theo sat on the floor of his apartment, surrounded by his notebooks. Pages of Russian case endings, handwritten Urdu poems, Coptic verb trees, Swahili proverbs. He stared at them like they were relics from a life he never got to live. That evening, Lena called. "You need to see what they did today." Theo met her on campus. Behind the library, she handed him a printout of a faculty-wide newsletter. Inside was a paragraph. "The department reaffirms its commitment to maintaining academic integrity and appropriate boundaries between instructional, custodial, and support roles." They'd officially named the boundary. A line between thinkers and cleaners, and they'd put Theo on the wrong side of it. The next morning, Theo decided to show up to campus anyway. Not to clean, not to hide, to sit. He walked into Lecture Hall C, the same hall where he used to mop the back row. He took a seat in the front, notebook in hand. The professor paused upon entering. "This class is for enrolled students only." "I'm auditing," Theo replied calmly. "You're not authorized." "I'm not interfering." A few students pulled out their phones. A few more whispered. But Theo didn't move. He opened a page of notes on Indo-European verb families and began transcribing what the professor said. After 15 minutes, campus security entered. 2 officers. "Sir, we need you to leave." Theo looked up. "Am I violating a law?" "This is university policy. I'm not disturbing anyone." The professor folded his arms. "He's refusing to leave." The students watched in stunned silence. Theo stood up slowly. And that's when the doors opened. 2 more security officers stepped in. One held cuffs. Gasps filled the lecture hall. A student shouted, "What the hell is this?" Another raised their phone. "He's literally just sitting here." The head officer stepped forward. "Mr. Miles, We need to escort you out, now. Theo stared at the faces around him. Future lawyers, diplomats, scholars, watching a black janitor who spoke 9 languages be treated like a trespasser, as if knowledge had a dress code. And as the cuffs were pulled from the officer's belt, 120 students looked on, frozen. They called campus security on him in front of 120 students. The air in lecture hall B was heavy with tension. The low hum of whispers grew as the campus security officers moved down the aisle toward Theo, who stood near the front, clutching his worn notebook. The professor, Dr. Warren Caldwell, had paused mid-lecture, his eyes narrowed, the faintest shadow of satisfaction crossing his face. Theo didn't speak. He didn't resist. He stood perfectly still, his posture calm, his breathing steady, while every pair of eyes in that lecture hall bore into him, some in disbelief, others in silent judgment. The lead officer spoke softly. "Sir, please come with us." Theo's voice came out low, controlled. "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time. You're being removed for disrupting class." Caldwell cleared his throat. "Let's be precise, officer. Mr. Miles was not authorized to be here. He's not an enrolled student. He's a janitorial employee." The word employee landed like a slap. Theo looked directly at Caldwell. "And yet I've taught your students more about dialects in 2 weeks than you have in 2 years. A few gasps rippled through the hall. Caldwell's face tightened. He motioned to the officers again. "Remove him." The second officer took Theo by the elbow. Theo didn't pull away, but the humiliation was unmistakable. His uniform, a symbol of honest work, was now treated as a crime scene. From the back row, a voice whispered, "Is this real?" Another student whispered back, "Just film it." Lena Brooks, first year, half black, half white, sitting in the second row, already had her phone in her hand. She was recording. Her heart pounded, her palms damp. Something about the quiet cruelty of it, the way nobody moved to stop it, made her skin crawl. Theo was being dragged out for daring to sit and learn. When the officer reached for Theo's arm again, Lena's whisper caught the moment like a pin through glass. "This is why my brother dropped out," she said, barely audible. But her mic caught it. Her brother, Jordan Brooks, had left an Ivy League program 2 years prior after being falsely accused of plagiarism. No one had believed him. Watching Theo now, Lena saw history replaying itself. Different face, same prejudice. Theo's notebook slipped from his hands as they led him toward the exit. Papers fluttered across the aisle like white flags, handwritten notes, translations, etymological trees. Students stared as the pages scattered, 9 languages pouring across the floor. Arabic, Mandarin, Latin, Swahili, Korean, all laid bare before them. Theo paused at the door, turned once, and met their eyes. "Remember what you saw today," he said softly. "Not who I am, but what they fear." Then he was gone. The officers escorted him through the main quad. The sight of a black janitor being marched out by security spread through campus faster than wildfire. Phones were raised. Photos snapped. Whispers erupted. Lena uploaded her video that night. She didn't edit it, she didn't add commentary. She simply captioned it. "Harvard janitor dragged out of class for wanting to learn. Let Theo speak." By midnight it had 50,000 views. By dawn, 500,000. Students began flooding comment sections. "This is what gatekeeping looks like. How do you humiliate brilliance in public and call it policy?" He wasn't trespassing. He was trying to learn. The hashtag "Let the CEO speak" trended by morning. That same morning, Theo sat in a holding room in the administration building. The walls were white, the fluorescent lights harsh. Across from him sat Marla Jenkins, his supervisor, her face tight with apology. "They're suspending you, Theo," she said quietly. He didn't flinch. "For what?" "Violation of university boundaries. They're calling it a breach of conduct." Theo gave a dry laugh. "Boundaries. That's the word again, isn't it? It's never policy. It's boundaries." "I tried to talk to HR," Marla said. "They've made up their minds. It's indefinite." "Nope." Theo leaned back, exhaustion creeping through him like frost. "You ever notice, Marla, how the word policy always protects power, not people?" She looked at him sadly. "You're not wrong." He gathered his few things, his ID badge, his work gloves, his key ring. "Tell them I'll turn in the uniform next week. I earned it so they can wait." Marla nodded. She didn't stop him when he walked out. Outside, students were gathering on the steps of Emerson Hall. Homemade posters, handwritten signs. One read, Fluency may yell privilege. Another said, let him speak. Theo stopped short, stunned. Lena spotted him first and ran over. They're planning a sit-in, she said breathlessly. Classes are cancelled in solidarity. Even grad students are joining. Theo shook his head slowly. Lena, you shouldn't get involved in this. She folded her arms. You didn't ask to be treated like this either. But silence helps them, not us. Her voice trembled, but her resolve didn't. Theo exhaled deeply. What you did posting that video, it's brave. But it'll make them come for you too. I'm already used to that, she said quietly. Every time I walk into a room, they assume I'm someone's assistant, not a scholar, not a leader.
Theo looked at her then, really looked.
You remind me of myself 20 years ago. Lena smiled faintly. Then maybe we'll finish what you started. Behind her, a crowd was forming. Students chanting. Professors watching from the steps. Uncertain, the administration building's blinds flickered. By noon, reporters had arrived. CNN, Boston Globe, BuzzFeed. Cameras rolled. Theo refused interviews. He didn't want to become spectacle. He wanted truth. That afternoon, Harvard released a statement. We value diversity of thought and opportunity. However, all staff and faculty must adhere to access protocols. Unauthorized participation in instructional environments constitutes a breach of university procedure. It was the same language as every cover-up before it. Polite, polished, poisonous. Lena read it out loud during the sit-in. You hear that? They're not denying what they did. They're justifying it. Theo stayed quiet. He stood near the steps, coat collar raised, the November wind cutting through him. Every cheer of solidarity made him both grateful and uneasy, because he knew Harvard's next move wouldn't be dialogue. It would be retaliation. Sure enough, that night, the email came. Subject, administrative action, employment status. Effective immediately. Theodore Miles is suspended without pay pending further investigation into violations of university boundaries and conduct expectations. Theo read it twice, then again just to feel the words settle. Suspended without pay. The sentence felt clinical, final. He closed the laptop and sat in silence. The city outside was alive with sirens and laughter, oblivious to the quiet ruin unfolding in his apartment. A knock came at his door. It was Lena again. She looked worried. They're saying you might lose housing too. Since your job provides campus lodging. Theo's head dropped into his hands. He didn't cry. He just whispered, they're efficient. I'll give them that. Lena hesitated, then placed a folded piece of paper on the table. I think you should see this. He opened it. It was a printout of a faculty memo, marked confidential. It was from Dr. Caldwell. We must restore order before this narrative damages Harvard's reputation. Recommend immediate separation from employment. Consider NDAs if public unrest continues. Theo looked up, disbelief sharpening his features. Caldwell wrote this. Lena nodded. He's throwing you under the bus to save himself. Theo sat back, silent for a long moment. Of course he is. Men like Caldwell don't climb. They curate ladders. Lena took a seat across from him. So what will you do? He looked at the memo again, his name printed next to words like risk and disruption. Finally, he said, I'm going to let them speak first. Every lie they tell will expose what they really are. Lena frowned. And if they silence you? Theo's gaze hardened. Then I'll find a louder language. Outside, chants continued to echo through the quad. Let Theo speak banners hung from the library windows. Reporters filmed live coverage near the gates. But inside the administration office, behind locked doors, Harvard's Board of Discipline drafted one more document. Permanent termination hearing scheduled. Subject to institutional discretion. Theo didn't know it yet. By the next sunrise, Harvard would leak their own official story to the press, one that painted him as an ungrateful worker who violated trust, breached security, and endangered research integrity. By morning, the same world that had called him a genius would start calling him a fraud. And the university he'd once dreamed of joining was preparing to bury him again, this time for good. Theo was suspended without pay for violating university boundaries. The story had already escaped Harvard's gates. By the time the Board of Discipline met to draft their case against Theo, the media frenzy had already taken hold. CNN aired a primetime segment titled Custodian or Scholar, the Ivy League janitor who shook Harvard. The footage of Theo being escorted out of Lecture Hall B played on a loop. Online, the reaction was swift. and divided. Some called him a hero, others, a threat to order. But one thing was certain: Harvard's PR team was no longer in control. The official university statement, released less than 12 hours after Theo's suspension, was crafted like a scalpel, measured, clean. It avoided racial terminology but dripped with coded language. We deeply value diverse voices. However, we must also uphold policies designed to protect academic spaces and ensure institutional integrity. A second memo circulated internally to faculty only. Unformalized persons interacting with academic materials without credentialed oversight represent a potential breach of sensitive research environments. Translation: Theo wasn't one of them, and never would be. Within 24 hours, the university had stripped Theo's campus access, revoked his housing, and locked him out of his institutional email. He was, legally speaking, no longer an employee, but still bound by non-disclosure clauses tied to his previous contracts. That irony wasn't lost on him. "They won't let me speak," Theo muttered, as he sat in a borrowed apartment in Dorchester, reading the policy documents. "But they'll dissect every word I've ever said." Lena sat across from him, phone buzzing with interview requests. "You've got journalists asking for comment, pro bono attorneys calling nonstop. There's a national law firm that wants to represent you. They said your case is a civil rights flashpoint." Theo didn't answer. He was staring at his old work gloves folded beside him. They still smelled like pine cleaner and linoleum. The door buzzed. It was a courier with a thick envelope. No return address. Just a crimson seal. Theo opened it. Inside, a check for $75,000, an NDA, and a one-paragraph note. "Accept this as a final gesture of goodwill. By signing, you agree not to discuss your time at Harvard publicly, nor pursue further claims. Your dignity deserves quiet resolution." He read the line 3 times. "Your dignity deserves quiet resolution." "What is that supposed to mean?" Lena said, standing behind him. "It means they think silence is a gift," Theo whispered, "as if truth is noise." He folded the NDA, slid the check back inside, and handed the envelope to Lena. "Burn it." But Harvard wasn't done. The next morning, Theo's name appeared on a leaked internal watch list marked Elevated Risk, Confidential. It wasn't from campus security. It was from the university's legal division. They had begun building a case, painting Theo as a potential cybersecurity breach, implying he'd accessed confidential student records through his custodial terminal. No proof, just insinuation. Enough to seed doubt. Worse yet, a reporter from the Boston Journal contacted Lena with a chilling question. "Did you know Mr. Miles might not be a U.S. citizen?" Theo stared at the message in disbelief. His father had immigrated from Ghana in 1972. Theo was born in Newark, raised in Atlanta, but he knew what the question really meant. They were reaching, weaponizing identity, suggesting illegitimacy, framing him not just as an outsider but an intruder. "This is the playbook," Lena said. "If they can't discredit your brain, they'll attack your belonging." Former students began speaking out in Theo's defense. A black alumnus posted anonymously. "In 2004, I was told my name was too ethnic for the admissions brochure. I graduated with honors. They never featured me once." A former teaching fellow added, "I was passed over for a faculty role because the hiring committee wasn't ready for a non-white face leading the department." The pattern was becoming impossible to deny. But Harvard's silence grew louder. Behind the scenes, the Board of Discipline accelerated its internal inquiry. Arguments surfaced, some real, some doctored, about Theo's failure to adhere to custodial protocol. They tried to cast him as reckless, as unstable, as someone who blurred roles. But that narrative cracked when Mina Choi, Caldwell's former protege, broke her silence. In a viral Medium post titled "The Footnotes I Buried," she wrote, "Theo's annotations saved my thesis. Caldwell used him, and I let it happen. But Harvard punished the mind, not the theft." It was the first public fracture in the institution's wall. Inside the university, tensions boiled. Some professors demanded an open inquiry. Others threatened resignation if order wasn't restored. Caldwell, for his part, disappeared from public view. Rumors swirled of a pending sabbatical, a mental health leave, a sudden family emergency. But the truth was simpler. He was hiding. Then came the twist. A tenured professor named Dr. Marin Holt, who had quietly supported Theo from the beginning, requested a private meeting. They met in a small cafe in Central Square. Rain tapped the windows. Theo arrived in a hoodie and worn jeans. Dr. Holt sat with tea, eyes tired but focused. "I've followed every step of this," she said. "I've taught here 31 years, and I've seen worse stories buried. But yours has roots." Theo listened. "I want to help you," she continued, "but not with a lawsuit, with something more dangerous." Theo raised an eyebrow. "I want you to co-write an expose, an academic one, peer-reviewed, historical, documented, using names, dates, policies, from legacy admissions to donor influence to racial bias in hiring." "You want me to expose Harvard?" Theo said flatly. "No," Dr. Holt replied. "I want us to expose how Harvard became Harvard." Theo stared at her. "You're tenured. You'd lose everything." She nodded. "If I retire quietly, I'll be remembered as a footnote. But if I help you tell the truth, maybe I become a spark." He was silent for a long moment. "What's the catch?" he finally asked. She looked him dead in the eye. "We name names, including mine, including yours, and once it's out, there's no going back." A tenured professor offers Theo a secret alliance, with strings attached. Theo sat in the back booth of the cafe long after Dr. Holt had left. Her offer hung in the air like the last note of a requiem, heavy, unfinished and dangerous. "A co-written expose," she'd said. "A fire starter." But even as the idea tempted him, another message arrived that would threaten to pull him in the opposite direction. It was from Caldwell. Subject line: "Let's talk. One final time." Attached was a single line: "Room 217, Linguistics Wing. Tonight, after hours." Theo almost deleted it. But something about the timing, so soon after Holt's proposal, felt strategic, calculated, and that was exactly why he went. The linguistics wing was dimly lit when he arrived. The glass-paneled doors were locked, but Caldwell had left one cracked open. Inside, the office was clinically clean, books aligned, no stray paper in sight. Theo stepped in slowly. Caldwell didn't stand. He sat behind his desk, wineglass in hand, posture casual but alert. "I thought you might come," he said. "Please, sit." Theo remained standing. Caldwell sipped his wine. "What happened to you? It's unfortunate. Avoidable. Spare me the sympathy," Theo said flatly. "Why am I here?" Caldwell leaned forward. "Because I'm offering you a chance to control how this ends, or at least how it looks." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick draft manuscript, bound with a crimson clip. Theo recognized it instantly. It was the collaborative work, the deep linguistic analysis Theo had contributed to in Caldwell's lab. Caldwell placed it on the desk between them. "It's brilliant. Revolutionary, actually. Peer-reviewed already. Ready for publication." Theo narrowed his eyes. "My annotations are in that." "More than annotations," Caldwell said. "Whole segments are yours. I'd be lying if I said otherwise." "Then give me credit." Caldwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's the part I want to negotiate." He slid another document across the table. A contract. Theo scanned the top line. "Acknowledgement of intellectual contribution. Non-attribution agreement," Caldwell explained. "In exchange for a one-time compensation, 6 figures, you agree to waive public authorship. In private circles, I'll refer to you as my silent collaborator, a kind of ghost genius." Theo stared at him. "You want me to bury myself again? For your career?" "For both our careers," Caldwell said quickly. "Think about it. You get paid. I get the platform. It doesn't have to be public to be powerful." Theo's voice was ice. "You mean, as long as the power stays with you?" Caldwell shrugged. "The dean has already signed off. We could have it finalized by tomorrow." Theo blinked. "The dean approved this?" Caldwell leaned back. "He prefers resolution over revolution." Theo didn't speak. He picked up the manuscript, flipped through it. His own words stared back at him, stripped of context. Lines he'd written late at night in a storage closet, now footnoted under Caldwell's name. He placed the manuscript back on the desk. "I'll think about it," he said. Caldwell smiled. "Smart man." Theo walked out, heart pounding. It took all his strength not to slam the door behind him. By the time he reached the sidewalk, the rage was boiling. He didn't go home. He went to Lena's dorm. She opened the door in a sweatshirt and slippers, surprised to see him. "You okay?" "I need to show you something," Theo said. She read the contract twice, then a third time. Then she looked up, furious. "This is blackmail. It's bribery, Theo corrected. Polite bribery. What are you going to do? Theo hesitated. I don't know. Lena's eyes flashed. Then I do. She didn't say what. She didn't need permission. Theo left shortly after, unaware that she had taken photos of every page of that contract. 2 days later, the Harvard Crimson student newspaper broke the story. Internal deal exposed. Harvard dean approved ghostwriting agreement to bury janitor's contributions. Screenshots of the contract. Side-by-side comparison of Theo's handwritten notes with the published manuscript draft. And an email chain between Caldwell and the dean casually discussing compensation to ensure Mr. Miles remains off record. The campus erupted. Faculty were blindsided. Alumni wrote open letters. Donors withdrew pledges. The story hit Twitter, then morning shows, then national headlines. Students rallied again, this time louder, angrier. They flooded the administrative offices with thousands of messages. Reinstate Theo. Fire Caldwell. Expose the dean. Theo found out at the same time the rest of the world did. He was drinking coffee at a corner shop when his phone buzzed non-stop. He clicked one link, then another. He saw his own notes. Published. Exposed. Vindicated. And he knew immediately. Lena had leaked it. He called her. She answered on the second ring. You mad? No, he said softly. I just didn't know it would feel this real. She paused. Are you ready for what comes next? He exhaled. I wasn't before. I think I am now. But neither of them could have predicted how fast it would spiral. That afternoon, Caldwell held a press conference. He didn't deny the documents. He called them out of context and claimed Theo had never expressed a desire for authorship. He closed with, "This is a tragic misunderstanding of what collaboration sometimes looks like behind closed doors." The backlash was immediate. Hashtags emerged. Theo wrote that, "Not your ghost." Harvard exposed. But the true twist came hours later. An anonymous whistleblower emailed the Crimson with a leaked voice memo. In the recording, Caldwell could be heard speaking to the dean. If this blows up, we'll just discredit him. Say he was unstable. You've got those old HR notes, right? The ones we flagged? Use them. Theo played the recording on repeat. Every time, it hit harder. This wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at his reflection in the window. Harvard hadn't just tried to silence him. They had built a machine to erase him. Lena leaked the document anonymously to student press, and chaos erupted. Smoke doesn't rise from bricks, but something about Harvard's campus that week made it feel like it could. The air was thick with unrest. Chants echoed from the quad every afternoon, and silent protests lined the halls by morning. Students taped banners across stone buildings. Knowledge belongs to everyone. Theo taught us, not your ghostwriter. Professors began canceling lectures, citing moral conflict with institutional decisions. For the first time in decades, the ivory tower trembled. But while the academic walls were crumbling, Theo sat on the edge of a creaky bed in a borrowed room in Dorchester, phone vibrating against his knee. Unknown number. He let it ring once, twice. Then answered. A pause. Then a voice he hadn't heard in 15 years. Zad? Theo's spine straightened. The word pulled something raw out of his chest. Jalen, he breathed. Yeah, I wasn't sure you'd pick up. The CO's throat tightened. Why are you calling? Another pause. They showed a video of you at my school. The one where they dragged you out of the lecture. I didn't even know you worked at Harvard. Theo closed his eyes. I didn't tell you because I didn't think you'd care.
I care now, Jalen said.
My teacher said you're trending. Said what they did was racist. That you should have been the one teaching. Theo didn't know what to say. His son was 21 now. He hadn't seen him since he was 6. I'm sorry, Jalen said quietly, for not reaching out sooner. Theo felt like the floor shifted beneath him. All these years of silence, and now from the wreckage, a voice he thought he'd lost forever. Where are you? He asked. Detroit. Still. I'm at Henry Ford Community. Studying digital art. Theo smiled faintly. I didn't know you were into that. Yeah, well, there's a lot we don't know about each other. They spoke for another hour. About classes. About Theo's old vinyl collection. Jalen used to dance to. About the quiet kind of loneliness that builds when two people drift and both think the other doesn't want to be found. Before hanging up, Jalen said, You should know something. They're using your story here. In class, you're a case study now. Theo laughed softly. For what? Insurrection? For for courage. But Harvard wasn't done rewriting his story. That afternoon, Theo received a tip from a former colleague. The university had commissioned a third-party investigative report. Its purpose wasn't clarity, it was containment. The findings would be selectively leaked to the press, carefully spun. Theo braced himself. Sure enough, by morning, headlines emerged. Harvard janitor's past raises concerns over stability. Sources. Miles had history of workplace sensitivities. Was Theo Miles ever meant for academia? They dug deep, pulled fragments of old HR notes. Moments when Theo had questioned supply shortages. When he'd asked why certain lecture halls were restricted. They twisted every instance into a pattern of boundary testing. One article subtly suggested he had once raised his voice at a professor. A lie, but dressed in enough ambiguity to feel plausible. They're rewriting you, Lena said, tossing the latest article on the table. Theo didn't respond. He was staring at a different paper, his own journal. A page where he'd once written, in 6 languages, to speak and not be heard, is to vanish twice. They're not just scared of what I said, he finally murmured. They're scared of who listens. That same day, while walking past the bookstore, a student stopped him. You don't remember me, she said, out of breath. But you cleaned our seminar room 2 years ago. I left my flash drive. You returned it with notes, corrections in Arabic. I got into grad school because of that. Theo blinked. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. That's why I had to say it. News crews circled the campus like hawks. NPR requested a sit-down. The New Yorker offered a feature, but Theo declined them all. Not yet. He hadn't told his full story because it still wasn't done. Then came the unexpected knock. A visitor at his temporary door. An older white man with glasses, hunched shoulders, and an envelope tucked beneath one arm. Theo answered. Cautious. Mr. Miles, the man asked. I'm Dr. Francis Bell. Theo's brow furrowed. I chaired the admissions committee in 2009. When you applied to the graduate program, Theo stiffened. I came to apologize, Dr. Bell said, eyes lowered, and to tell you the truth. Theo stepped aside slowly, allowing him in. They sat at the small table. Dr. Bell opened the envelope and removed a faded printout, a copy of Theo's original Harvard application. I fought for you, he said. I pushed hard, but a donor's son was on the wait list that year. The dean at the time asked us to make space. Theo stared, breath shallow. You were overqualified, Bell continued. Your essays, your scores, your multilingual assessments. You were one of the best candidates we'd ever seen. But someone with a name they recognized needed that slot, so you were denied. Theo closed his eyes. 15 years of wondering, confirmed in one quiet confession. I should have told you then, Bell said. But I stayed silent, like everyone else. Why now? Theo asked. Because silence is complicity. And because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. I won't get another chance to clear my conscience. Theo sat back, stunned. He didn't know what justice looked like anymore, but he knew this wasn't it. Still, he nodded. Thank you for telling me. Dr. Bell handed him the printout. It's yours. Maybe it can still matter. As he left, Theo stood by the window, watching the campus in the distance. He thought of Jalen, of his late nights in the archives, of his mother, who once told him, you will be underestimated by design. So make your mind the loudest thing in the room. That night, Theo received another call. Blocked number. A voice came through, cold, rehearsed. This is legal counsel for the Harvard Corporation. We've been informed of the confession made by Dr. Bell. We'd strongly advise against sharing it publicly. Such a document could constitute a breach of confidentiality. Further legal action may follow. Theo didn't respond. He simply ended the call. Because now he wasn't afraid of their threats. He had something bigger than leverage. He had the truth. A former professor who once rejected Theo's application resurfaces, with a confession. The letter was cream-colored, with the Harvard seal embossed in the top left corner, and the language was formal, dignified, exactly what Theo had imagined receiving all those years ago. Only now, 15 years late, it sat in his hands like a ghost trying to be real. We are pleased to inform you of your acceptance into the Harvard Graduate Program in Linguistics, class of 2. Theo read it once, then again, then a third time. He didn't speak, didn't blink. The words on the page were undeniable. This was not a draft, not a maybe. It was a finalized offer, signed, sealed, and dated. But he had never received it. He sat in the office of Clara Henderson, a retired administrative assistant who had worked in Harvard admissions for over 40 years. She was now in her 70s, frail but sharp-eyed, sitting across from Theo in her tidy Brighton apartment. "I found it last week," she said, "in an old personnel archive box they were going to shred. I recognized your name. I remembered the mess from that year. Thought you should have it." Theo's voice was a whisper. "Why wasn't it sent?" Clara hesitated. "Because someone stopped it. A donor's son, Blake Hargrave, was supposed to be waitlisted, but his father made a call. Suddenly, we were told to adjust the cohort. You were the adjustment." Theo felt like the floor disappeared beneath him. "You mean, they accepted me?" She nodded, and then made it disappear. "Did the dean know?"
Clara let out a breath. He was the one who signed the override.
Theo stared at the letter. The date on it was March 28, 2009. 3 weeks before he received a rejection email that called his application not the right fit for Harvard at this time. He clenched the paper tighter. This could have changed everything. Clara reached across the table and gently placed a hand over his. "It still can't." That evening, Theo sat in the corner of a quiet library, the letter in his lap. Outside, the protests had swelled again. Students were demanding the resignation of the dean, calling for Caldwell's termination, and organizing a campus-wide academic boycott. But Theo was somewhere else in the past, rewinding memories. All those nights he'd spent in the janitorial closet, listening to audio lectures, all the applications he'd sent, all the ways he thought he wasn't enough. And the whole time, he had been accepted. They had just erased it. He texted Lena, "Meet me, now." They met in the empty stairwell of Emerson Hall. Lena read the letter silently. Her hands trembled by the second paragraph. "They accepted you," she said, as if saying it would make it more real. "They just never told you." Theo nodded. "This is massive," she whispered. "It proves everything. The nepotism, the systemic bias, the cover-ups, the gatekeeping, all of it." Theo looked at her. "If I go public with this, they'll come after me harder than ever." "I know," she said, "but it's already happening. You might as well give them something they can't spin." Theo hesitated. What if it just becomes another headline, another outrage cycle? Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a card. "I've been holding on to this. You remember Nadia Ullman from The Atlantic? She called twice last week. She's legit. Investigative. Long form. She doesn't do fluff. She wants to break this story." Theo frowned. "Journalists come and go." "She doesn't," Lena said. "But there's one condition." Theo raised an eyebrow. "She wants you on the record." Theo froze. "I can't be a symbol anymore," he said. "Not without context. Not without control." "Then tell your story," Lena replied. "On your terms." The next morning, Theo met Nadia in a private office arranged by student organizers. She wore no makeup, carried 2 battered notebooks, and had the tired eyes of someone who'd read too many court transcripts. "I've seen your work," Theo said. "You dig deep." "I don't write until I can name the rot," she said. "But I need your voice. Not second-hand accounts. Not leaks. Yours." Theo placed the letter on the table between them. "Start here." Nadia read in silence. When she looked up, her face was pale. "This is proof of academic fraud. And a systemic betrayal," Theo added. "I'll need names. You'll get them. Dates, emails, patterns. I've kept records," Theo said. "Everything they thought I'd forget, I wrote it down." She leaned back. "I want a 3-part series. Print and audio. I'll pitch the podcast to NPR. The title?" She paused. "The Janitor Who Got In." Theo smiled faintly. "Make it clear I was never out." But as they shook hands, her phone buzzed. Nadia glanced at the screen, frowned, then turned it toward Theo. A breaking news alert from Harvard today. Harvard dean under internal review. After allegations of misconduct, board launches confidential ethics probe. Theo's eyebrows rose. "They're moving fast. They know what you have now," Nadia said. "They're trying to stay ahead of it." That afternoon, Theo received another call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was low, deliberate. "This is Blake Hargrave." Theo's grip on the phone tightened. "I heard you have the letter. The one that was supposed to go to you instead of me." Silence. Blake continued. "I didn't know back then. I was a spoiled kid who thought the world owed him. But I know now. What they took from you." Theo said nothing. "I want to make it right," Blake added. "Name me. I don't care. I deserve it. Just tell the truth." Theo hung up. He sat in silence for a long time, then opened his journal. In bold, across the page, he wrote, "They opened the door to the wrong man. Now I won't leave until I rebuild the house." He picked up his phone, dialed Nadia back. "I'm ready," he said. "You're sure?" "Yes. But this time, no translation. No softening. I want every word to sting the way it did when they silenced me." She nodded. "Then let's begin. A journalist offers to break the story nationwide, but only if Theo speaks publicly." The email invitation landed in Theo's inbox. Like a strange dream. Subject, TEDx Harvard. Student-led event. Requesting your voice. At first he didn't open it. He stared at it for a full 5 minutes, fingers hovering over the trackpad. TEDx. The same Harvard, where he'd once cleaned gum from auditorium floors, where his languages were dismissed as too performative, where his name had been hidden in footnotes. Now they wanted him on stage. To inspire, to represent, to speak. He clicked it open anyway. "We are organizing a TEDx Harvard event, focused on unearthing hidden voices. You've become a symbol of resilience, and your story continues to shape campus discourse. We would be honored if you delivered the closing talk." It was signed by 5 students, including Lena. Theo leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. A symbol. That word haunted him more than silence ever had. He didn't want to be the janitor who overcame. He wanted to be the scholar he always was. Not a representation, not an exception, just equal. Still, he wrote the speech. Late into the night, he paced a small room in Lena's apartment, while she slept. His notebook lay open on the table. His words poured out, sharp, aching, honest. "You didn't discover me. You ignored me until I became inconvenient. You want me to be proof that your system works, but I'm evidence it's rigged. I cleaned your floors for 12 years, but I never mopped away who I was." He scribbled and rewrote, paused, breathed. Then, around 3:47 a.m., he stopped. He stared at the last line. "I no longer ask to be seen. I dare you to see yourselves." And something in him recoiled. He looked around the room, the Harvard hoodie draped on the chair, the protest signs by the door, the student flyers on the fridge. He was being made into something. A poster. A proof. He picked up the pages, walked to the trash can, and tore them in half. Then into quarters. Then into silence. He left the pieces there and went out for a walk before sunrise. By the time he returned, Lena was awake and furious. "You wrote a speech. I changed my mind. You tore it up." "I'm not a show," Theo said. "They want a bow on the pain. I won't give it to them." Lena didn't argue. Not then. But she didn't forget. That afternoon, while organizing student supplies, she found the torn pieces in the trash and slowly taped them back together. The speech was jagged, incomplete, but powerful. She knew what she had to do. That night, hundreds gathered in Harvard Yard for the largest protest yet. Banners stretched across the gates. "Let Theo speak. We are not your background noise. Accountability now." Students passed candles. Faculty stood at the back, arms folded. The air buzzed with anticipation. Lena stepped to the mic. She didn't explain. Didn't ask permission. She simply unfolded the speech and began to read. "You didn't discover me. You ignored me until I became inconvenient." Every voice hushed. Even the wind seemed to pause. "You want me to be proof that your system works, but I'm evidence it's rigged." Gasps. Murmurs. Phones raised. Cameras rolling. "I cleaned your floors for 12 years, but I never mopped away who I was." By the final lines, even some professors had tears in their eyes. "I no longer ask to be seen. I dare you to see yourselves." Silence. Then thunderous applause. The video hit social media within minutes. Within an hour, it was on fire. Theo's speech trended globally. Celebrities retweeted it. Civil rights organizations reposted it. Commentators dissected it. Theo watched it all unfold from Lena's couch, stunned. "I told you it mattered," Lena whispered. Theo didn't smile. He looked down. It wasn't meant to go public. It wasn't meant to be hidden either. By morning, his words were etched into chalkboards across campus, projected onto buildings. Students walked around quoting lines. Professors emailed him to apologize. High schools requested to use the speech in curriculum. It should have felt like victory. But then Harvard responded. An emergency memo was issued by the Board of Trustees. Not the deans. Not PR. The top. While we respect the rights of all individuals to express themselves, the university must safeguard against actions that may destabilize institutional order, misrepresent procedures, or breach internal codes of conduct. And then the hammer dropped. They formally launched an investigation, not into Caldwell, not into the dean, but into Theo. Allegations: unauthorized access, ethical violations, academic misrepresentation. Lena read the memo aloud. Theo just stared at it. "They're still trying to erase me." "No," she said. "Now they're trying to destroy you." Later that day, a quiet email landed in his inbox. Subject: meeting request. Board of Trustees. It was not a request. It was a summons. Harvard's Board of Trustees finally steps in. But they aren't on Theo's side. The boardroom on the 4th floor of Massachusetts Hall didn't look like a battlefield. But for Theo it was. Dark oak walls, antique paintings, leather chairs arranged in a tight circle that felt more like an interrogation pit than a place of dialogue. The table glistened under museum-grade lights, and every inch reeked of control. Theo stood at one end, flanked by 2 student reps, who had petitioned for his presence. Lena wasn't allowed in. No press, no phones, just 12 trustees, suits starched and expressions carved in stone. The chair, a sharp-eyed woman named Meredith Shaw, began. "Mr. Miles," she said coolly, "we've reviewed your recent conduct. While your personal experiences are regrettable, your methods for addressing them have undermined university order." Theo said nothing. Another trustee cleared his throat. "Posting internal documents, delivering unsanctioned public speeches, inciting protests that have disrupted academic operations. This isn't the Harvard way." Theo finally spoke. "Neither is burying acceptance letters or forcing silence through NDAs." The room stiffened. Meredith's smile didn't flinch. "Be that as it may, institutional reputation is paramount." "And what about integrity?" Theo asked. "Is that part of your reputation?" An older man leaned forward. "Mr. Miles, we understand your frustration. Dr. Caldwell has submitted his resignation, effective immediately." Theo blinked. No announcement, no apology, just gone. "And his payout?" Theo asked. A beat. Silence. "He will receive his contractual retirement package," the chair said. "This is standard protocol." Theo scoffed. "You let him walk away clean, but call me insubordinate." Another trustee interjected. "We're willing to offer you a formal reinstatement to your prior role, with full pay, benefits, even a public acknowledgement, so long as you agree to cease further public commentary." Theo stared at them, stunned. "You want me to go back to sweeping floors while you control the narrative?" "It's more than many receive," Meredith said. "We're offering resolution." Theo leaned on the table. "What you're offering is containment." He stood straight, pulled a folded document from his jacket, and placed it on the table. "Then let me offer you something else. A formal notice of intent to sue Harvard University for racial discrimination, suppression of academic opportunity, and retaliatory conduct. This isn't a protest anymore. It's litigation." The room rippled. "Backed by whom?" Meredith asked, though her voice cracked slightly. Theo turned and walked out. Outside, Lena waited. "Well?" He handed her a copy of the notice. She read the first line, eyes wide. "Wait. L. Banks and Associates? The civil rights firm?" Theo nodded. An alumnus read the speech. "Called me, said they've been waiting for a case like this." Back at the apartment, Theo opened his laptop to find 50 new emails. Support, media requests, legal referrals, students wanting to join the lawsuit. He wasn't a janitor anymore. He wasn't a symbol. He was a plaintiff. Harvard tried to downplay it at first, issued neutral press statements, hired a crisis PR firm. But as the court date loomed, the mood shifted. The deposition list was long. Caldwell, the former dean, Clara Henderson, Dr. Bell, and Theo. On the eve of the trial, Theo stayed late at Lena's place organizing his testimony. At 11:40 p.m., he got up to retrieve a flash drive from his own apartment down the street. Lena offered to come. He declined. It would only take a minute. He didn't notice the door had been cracked open, or that the hallway light bulb had been smashed. Inside, his apartment was ransacked. Drawers pulled, books thrown, files missing. And on the kitchen table, in red marker, "Drop it." Theo backed out, pulse pounding, heart hammering. He called Lena. "It wasn't just about shutting me up," he said. "They want to scare me silent. You need to report this." I will, he said. But I'm not backing down. On the eve of court, someone breaks into Theo's apartment. The door was splintered, but not destroyed. The lock had been picked with surgical precision. Whoever had entered Theo's apartment hadn't come to loot. They came to listen, and worse, to learn. The police arrived 40 minutes later. Theo sat on the stoop, arms folded, the red marker threat, drop it, still burning in his mind. They took my notebooks, he said quietly. That's all, not the laptop, not the phone, just the notebooks. The responding officer, a young black man named Harris, raised an eyebrow. Notebooks? They were everything, Theo murmured. My handwritten language studies, journal entries, conversations. I translated, proof I contributed to papers, and memories. All of it's gone. The officer glanced around, but they didn't force the door. That tells me this wasn't random. Theo nodded. It was strategic. Surgical. The officer radioed for backup to sweep the apartment. While they waited, Theo walked through the wreckage. The living room bookshelves had been rummaged. The bathroom untouched. The desk drawers pried open, but not broken. Everything felt intentional, as if whoever did it knew exactly what they wanted. Then something strange. One of the younger officers called out from the hallway ceiling. Sir, you're gonna want to see this. In the vent above Theo's bedroom, wedged just behind the intake grate, was a small black rectangular object, wrapped in dust cloth. A listening device. Theo stared in disbelief. That's a surveillance recorder. The officer nodded grimly. This wasn't a break-in. This was a cleanup. They bagged the device, dusted for prints, and sealed the apartment as a crime scene. Theo gave a statement and was told to stay somewhere safe until further notice. He returned to Lena's place around 3 a.m., exhausted and haunted. They didn't just want to scare me, he said. They've been listening. For months. Lena sat across from him, stunned. To what? You don't talk to anyone on the phone. I read aloud when I translate, he whispered. I process ideas out loud when I write. My journals were verbal before they were written. She covered her mouth. They've been harvesting your thoughts. Theo nodded slowly. And now they're trying to erase them. The next morning, campus erupted again, but not because of the break-in, because a senior police official leaked information to a reporter. University whistleblower confirms long-term unauthorized surveillance of ex-staff member tied to discrimination lawsuit. The story exploded. Journalist camped outside Harvard Yard. Students skipped class to rally again. Protesters carried signs that read, "Who else are they watching?" and "Truth doesn't need a microphone to be loud." University officials scrambled to control the narrative. They released a carefully worded statement. Harvard takes allegations of unauthorized surveillance seriously. At this time, we have no evidence linking any university department to the incident involving Mr. Miles. But it was too late. The surveillance device had been real. The recording logs stretched back 6 months. The hard drive inside held hundreds of hours of Theo's personal reflections, language practice sessions, and notes on faculty behaviors. What made it worse? The device was standard issue for a specific internal team, Harvard Facilities Security. It was never meant to leave campus. And then, the twist. A whistleblower stepped forward. A memo was sent anonymously to the Crimson, signed only TB, Janitorial Services. It contained internal shift logs, custodial floor access maps, and maintenance technician schedules. Highlighted in red was one name, William Billy Lorne, Janitorial Supervisor. The same supervisor who had often criticized Theo for taking too long in staff closets. The same man who had given Caldwell regular access to janitorial records. The same man who, for years, had positioned Theo near certain departments, claiming routine rotation. Within hours, student forums lit up with speculation. They used facilities to surveil him. This is deeper than one professor. It's a system. Why is a janitor easier to monitor than a faculty abuser? Lena stared at the documents, mouth slightly open. GB, that can't be Billy himself. Theo shook his head. He hated me. But then his phone buzzed. A private number. No caller ID, he answered. The voice was shaky. Older. Familiar. Theo, it's Billy. Theo froze. I was wrong, Billy said, before Theo could speak. I was part of it. Not all of it. But enough. Theo clenched the phone. You watched them destroy me, and you said nothing. I was told you were dangerous, Billy said. Not to the students. Not even to the school, but to the system. Caldwell said, your ideas would destabilize tradition. and that if I cooperated, I'd finally get promoted to operations director. Theo didn't speak. I started noticing things, Billy continued. The longer I worked there, the more I saw how many exceptions were made for certain people, for certain names. But they never made exceptions for you. And now? Theo asked. Now I know I helped erase a genius, Billy said, voice cracking. And I want to help. Theo sighed. Why now? Because I heard one of the recordings before they took them. You were reciting the Quran in Arabic, then switching to Navajo, then Sanskrit, like it was second nature. And I thought, how many people did I step over, because I believed their silence meant stupidity? Theo let the silence stretch, then said, if you really want to help, testify.
Billy hesitated. I will. I swear it.
Theo hung up and stared out the window. The machine was bleeding now. Cracks were showing. And for the first time, someone from the inside wanted to help break it. The whistleblower is an unlikely ally, the janitorial supervisor. It wasn't a packed courtroom, at least not the way one might imagine, in a blockbuster trial. But the silence inside was heavier than any gavel. You could feel the weight of old walls holding old secrets, and they were starting to buckle. Theo sat at the plaintiff's table, in a charcoal suit, no tie, calm on the outside, but every inch of him braced for impact. This wasn't about getting justice anymore. It was about revealing just how deep the rot went. The judge, a sharp-eyed black woman, named Honorable Mavis R. Clement, presided over the federal courtroom, with a surgical sense of focus. She had already refused 3 motions to dismiss. She wasn't here to protect legacy. She was here for truth. On the 3rd day of proceedings, the star witness was called, William Billy Lorne, janitorial supervisor, Harvard facilities. Gasps fluttered through the gallery. Some faculty who had quietly come to spectate leaned forward. Even Harvard's attorneys tensed. Billy took the stand, sweating but steady. You understand you're under oath? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff's lawyer, a sharp black woman named Marla Banks, stepped forward. Mr. Lorne, can you tell us how long you worked at Harvard? 26 years, he said. Started in. And what was your role? Janitorial supervisor. Oversaw scheduling, rotation, floor access, managed facilities entry for all non-academic personnel. Were you ever asked to monitor the movements of specific staff members? Billy swallowed. Yes. Under what pretense? Security, he said. They claimed certain patterns in staff movement were raising concerns, particularly Mr. Miles. The courtroom stiffened. Marla raised a brow. What about Theo's patterns concerned them? Billy glanced at Theo, then looked down. They said he spent too much time in language labs, that he accessed rooms outside his shift areas. But more than that, they didn't like how many languages he knew. The audience shifted again. The judge leaned slightly forward. Marla didn't flinch. They monitored him because he was multilingual. Billy nodded. They said he had unstable intellectual interests. Said it was disruptive. Marla walked to the evidence table. She held up a series of documents. Internal memos. Confidential university emails. Redacted reports. These were recovered during pretrial discovery, she said. Can you identify them? Billy nodded again. I've seen all of them. Marla handed one to the clerk. Let's enter Exhibit F, a memo dated October 2014, from the Office of Risk Management. The judge allowed it. Marla turned to the jury. This memo refers to Mr. Miles as an anomaly and advises he be placed on non-central routes to minimize exposure to high-ranking donors and international guests. A hush fell over the courtroom. What did you do with this memo? Marla asked Billy. I obeyed, he said. I moved Theo away from visitors, away from events, away from anywhere his talents might be noticed. Why? She asked, voice soft but surgical. Because I thought they knew better. I thought they had a reason. And now, Billy looked up. Now I know the reason was racism and fear. Marla nodded and continued. Did you ever receive training or directives that would support this kind of profiling? Billy hesitated. Yes. In 2010, we were given a confidential slide deck titled Staff Predictive Risk Indicators. And what did it contain? He sighed. A list of risk traits. Things like excessive silence, intellectual eccentricity, language diversity. A juror blinked in disbelief. And who created this list? Billy hesitated again, then said, it originated from a think tank that advised the dean's office, founded by donors linked to legacy funding. Some of those donors had written papers in the 80s on eugenics-based cognitive models. Murmurs erupted in the gallery. The judge banged her gavel once. Order. Marla leaned in. So you're telling this court that Harvard, an institution revered globally, accepted a framework that effectively tied intellect to race? Billy nodded. Not in words, but in practice. Yes. She stepped back, and Mr. Miles was profiled, tracked and silenced, because his intelligence didn't fit their mold? Yes, Billy said, voice breaking. He didn't fail their system. He embarrassed it. Across the room, the lead Harvard attorney stood. Objection. Speculation. The judge waved it off. The witness is stating what he was told and observed. Overruled. Marla paused, then delivered the final strike. Mr. Lorne, one last question. Are you aware of any additional staff members who were similarly monitored? Billy hesitated. Yes, he said. All janitorial staff, but especially those of color. The silence turned into something else. Wait. Shame. Marla turned toward the judge. No further questions. The defense declined cross-examination. When Billy stepped down, he didn't return to the gallery. He simply walked out the exit door, tears forming in his eyes. Theo didn't stop him. He couldn't. He was still frozen, digesting what he'd heard. All those years. All the quiet redirections. All the offhand shifts. All the invisible walls. It wasn't accidental. It was designed. By the end of the week, more exhibits were introduced. Emails between Caldwell and donors, referring to Theo as potential PR volatility. Audio from the surveillance device capturing Theo quoting texts in Nahuatl Wolof, languages no Harvard course even offered. Old academic proposals Theo had discarded, now validated by current linguistic journals. Theo's journal entries, salvaged from an old USB backup, were entered into evidence as testimony of intellectual labor performed while underpaid and unrecognized. When the defense attempted to argue that Theo was merely a janitor, with no formal academic standing, Marla replied, and Harriet Jacobs was merely a housemaid. Frederick Douglass was merely a laborer. Black minds have always been discredited, until someone else can package them. Mr. Miles didn't lack qualification. He lacked permission. The judge didn't blink once during her rebuttal. At the close of that day's session, she called both legal teams to the bench, then turned to the courtroom. What I have seen here, she said slowly, is not simply institutional bias. It is systemic engineering of silence, the use of corporate surveillance and racial profiling, under the guise of academic protection. She paused. Therefore, I am issuing a judicial recommendation that this case be escalated to Federal Civil Rights Court under Title VI and EEOC jurisdiction. Harvard is no longer simply on trial for mistreating an employee. It stands accused of institutionalized discrimination that affects the fabric of American education. Gasps, shouts, press scrambling. Theo sat still, staring straight ahead. A new battle was coming. Bigger. National. But finally, the country would hear it all. The judge halts the trial, calling for federal intervention. 2 weeks after Judge Clement's ruling, the case moved beyond Theo. The Department of Education opened a formal federal civil rights inquiry. Media trucks camped outside Harvard's wrought iron gates. Legacy donors went silent. Several resigned from advisory boards overnight. Theo, though, found no joy in it. He walked through the noise without hearing it. His mind anchored in something quieter, resolve. Then came the offer. A private courier delivered it in a matte black folder. No logo, just a single line on the envelope. Confidential, for Mr. Theodore Miles only. Inside were 4 pages. Legalese. Non-disclosure terms. Withdrawal clauses. And at the bottom, typed in bold, total settlement, $3,000 USD. $3 million. Theo read it once, then again. No apology, no admission, no public acknowledgement. Just hush money. Lena sat across from him at the kitchen table, watching his expression. They're scared, she whispered. They think a check will shut you up. Theo ran a hand over the document. This isn't a settlement. It's a silencing. He folded the paper, then held it over a lit candle. The flame caught slowly, curling the edges into black. The words turned to smoke. That's my answer, he said. The next day, Theo submitted a different request, not to the court, but to Harvard's interim leadership, who were now scrambling to save face in the storm. He didn't want a job. He didn't want money. He wanted a stage. A public forum, on campus, under Harvard's banner, open to all. No edits, no PR framing, no corporate spin, just truth. It took 3 days for them to respond, another 4 to arrange it. By then, the internet had already begun speculating. Would he finally speak? Would Harvard allow it? The answer came in a single sentence printed across crimson flyers. An open address by Theodore Miles. Friday, 7 p.m., Sanders Theater. The theater hadn't been that full in years. Every seat taken. Students, professors, reporters, faculty, who had once ignored Theo's existence, now stood in the aisles. The room buzzed like an open wire. Theo stood alone on stage. No podium, no microphone. Just him and the truth. He wore no suit, just the same blue uniform shirt he used to mop floors in. Clean, pressed, symbolic. He waited for the crowd to settle. Then began. When I was 15, I read my first book in Latin. At 17, I spoke 3 languages. By 20, I understood 6. I applied here twice. He paused. No notes, no teleprompter. And I was told both times that I didn't fit, that I lacked pedigree, that I didn't belong. A quiet murmur moved through the audience. So I mopped your floors instead. I emptied your trash. I listened as professors dismissed students for struggling with languages I taught myself while cleaning their offices. Theo walked slowly across the stage, each step grounded in pain, earned. I translated dissertations no one asked me to. I tutored students in dialects I never took a class in. I was ignored in 10 languages, and fluent in silence. Laughter. Then guilt. I didn't clean this campus because I failed to rise. I cleaned it because this institution refused to bend. He held up a tattered notebook. This was taken from me, along with opportunity, along with dignity. But what they didn't take, what they never could, was understanding. The room hung on his words. I understand why they feared me. Not because I broke rules, but because I broke expectations. A few gasps. A few tears. I am not here today because Harvard chose to acknowledge me. I am here because it couldn't erase me. Silence. The truth is, I don't want revenge. I want revelation. Not because I need applause, but because the next janitor you overlook might be a world builder. The crowd stood, applause thunderous, long, unrelenting. And as it died down, a single voice from the audience rang out, gentle but piercing. Would you ever teach here? The theater went still. Theo looked toward the crowd, searching for the voice. He couldn't see the face. He smiled faintly, then said, a voice in the crowd asks, would you ever teach here? 2 years later, the steps of Harvard Yard no longer echoed under Theo Miles's boots as a custodian. They echoed beneath him as Professor Theodore Miles, tenured faculty in linguistics and social systems. Fall leaves scattered across the stone paths, crisp underfoot. Students huddled in jackets, books in hand. They moved with purpose, some still unaware that the man passing them had once polished the very floors they walked on. But others looked up and nodded, respectful. Some even smiled. They knew. His first class was held in Emerson 305, a lecture hall Theo had once been barred from cleaning during donor visits. Now his name was etched on the course roster. Ling 2719. Language, power, and silence. Inside, the room was full. Every seat taken. Some students sat cross-legged on the floor. Others stood in the back. They weren't just enrolled, they were eager. On the whiteboard, Theo had written only one thing before the students arrived. What is the sound of being overlooked? When the door clicked shut behind the last student, Theo stepped forward. No PowerPoint, no textbook, just present. He looked out at the crowd, eyes scanning rows of curious, determined faces, and paused when he reached Lena, seated at the front. She smiled. She wasn't a student anymore. She was his TA. They'd stayed in touch after the trial, after the forum, after Harvard agreed to not only reinstate Theo, but promote him, and commission a formal audit of its hiring and surveillance practices. The audit had uncovered years of discriminatory decisions. Theo's case had forced the university to create a reparative justice fellowship. And for the first time in its history, Harvard implemented an independent equity tribunal outside of its own administration. Caldwell had vanished from academia. Rumors said he now lived somewhere in rural Vermont, writing under pseudonyms. No one confirmed it. No one needed to. Theo stepped behind the lectern and placed a small stone there, a symbol from his childhood in Detroit. A reminder that you can build futures from fragments. Then he began. Language is not just what we speak, he said. It's what we're allowed to say, what others permit us to hear, and what power decides is valid. He paused, letting the silence settle. For years I was fluent in many tongues, but not one system allowed me to be heard. I translated knowledge, but no one translated respect. He walked slowly to the front of the class. This course won't teach you just syntax or sentence structure. It will teach you the politics of whose voice matters, who gets published, who gets funded, and who gets erased. A few students nodded, pens scribbling. In this class, silence is a text, and we will read it loudly. Lena passed him a stack of handouts. The syllabus. Students flipped through. No exams. No multiple choice. The assessments were essays, dialogues, reflections. The final assignment? Translate a piece of yourself you've been forced to hide. Theo smiled as he saw the looks on their faces. Curiosity, fear, awe. The very emotions he'd once felt scrubbing the corners of these halls. At the end of the 90-minute session, as students packed their bags, Theo walked back to the board and wrote one final line.
I see you.
He turned. And now, as I promised, I'll end today the way my journey began. The class went quiet, and Theo began to speak. The same simple phrase, spoken in 9 languages, flawlessly.
I understand.
In Arabic, in Cantonese, in Igbo, in Portuguese, in Navajo, in Korean, in Russian, in Haitian Creole, and finally, in English. The class sat frozen. Then, as if on cue, they rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Not for a viral sensation, not for a redemption arc, for a man who rewrote what it meant to be brilliant, and forced the world to ask, what makes someone worth listening to? Some truths don't need shouting, just someone brave enough to speak them. If Theo's story moved you, don't let it stop here. Type yes if you believe silence should never be a reason for erasure. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eyes.